You're listening to the Simply Strategic Ministry podcast hosted by Patrick Weichel. Our goal is to help you grow your ministry through simple strategies and scalable systems. With over a decade of ministry experience, we know that these strategies and systems will bring value to you as a leader and to your entire team.
Hey, thanks for joining us on the podcast today, episode 2. I'm joined by a new friend, Zach Workun, and he is a student ministry specialist, which I feel like
it sounds so official. It sounds so official.
Dude, it sounds so official. It's like you've been trained. You've had the SEAL 6, Team 6 training of student ministry. Although,
like your doctor went to school for 10, the specialist went to school for 14. 100%. Right.
And then the emoji next to it being the slice of pizza. I was like, maybe he knows something that I don't, because it's like a badge. It's like an icon of honor.
I just feel like Zach, that's the youth ministry icon for so many folks, right? Because that is like such the like universal question of like pizza and math, and like it is the youth pastor word problem. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So really today's episode, the simple strategy to grow your ministry, just buy pizza. So let me pray and we'll be done. I'm just
done. Nailed it. Yeah,
nailed it. Zach,
stick around to the end and I'll tell you the actual ratio.
Yeah, dude. We'll tell you the secret. Today's simple strategy is learning how much pizza to order for how many students you have.
That's right. Yeah.
Stewardship.
Don't waste your slice. Okay. Is that the title of the episode? Don't waste your slice.
Episode 2. Don't waste your slice. So, okay, you're at Lifeway. If you don't know what Lifeway is, you should know.
I think a lot of folks. So just to weigh in, I feel like everybody has their own image of what Lifeway is, and some of what I get to do is explaining like it's always a little bigger than folks realize. Like for some folks, Lifeway's the people they order communion cups from. Like, oh yeah, that's like the little like grape juice shot glasses.
Those guys, yeah.
But sometimes, we used to print a lot of hymnals. If you go to Fuge Camp or Student Life Camp, that's also Lifeway. If you use Gospel Project. One of my favorite stories ever, Patrick, was working in my very first conference thing. People come to the booth and we're just like, man, good to meet you. Lifeway's good. I mean, I like, some of the stuff that you do, but our church, we switched to Gospel Project and we just love it a lot better. And I'm like, awesome. Also Lifeway.
Yeah.
And so
you're like, just folks that's that really cool.
Like you have 3 different curriculum lines. I'm like, we actually now have 4. They're like, wait, what? And so it's huge. But at the same time, like in student ministry, like our teams get to do a lot of things that are highly relational. And so I know for a lot of folks, Lifeway used to mean like the retail store that was 2 towns over. They go visit twice a year and get VBS stuff in the springtime, and they get Christmas gifts in the fall. But well before there was brick and mortar, Lifeway for 150 years has been equipping churches with resources and VBSs and curriculum and Bibles and camps and things. So Lifeway, whatever you thought, it probably is a few more things than you thought of. And so that's always a fun conversation.
Yeah, 100%. Lifeway is great. We love Lifeway at SSM, and we've got deep ties to Lifeway, and we're big supporters, big fans. And so, yeah, man, I guess with that, tell us a little bit, give us the kind of just a brief snapshot of what you do as a student ministry specialist. And we got to meet a couple weeks ago, actually, for the first time at a conclave in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is great. Over 700 student pastors, I heard, or their families, and
from many states.
Equipped.
Yes,
from like 7 states or something like that. And
conclave's fun that way because it is like the gathering. It's like big family reunion where your Kentucky cousins and your North Carolina aunts and uncles are all coming to visit.
Yeah. And it was great. We got to do a breakout there, and that was awesome. We're really thankful for that. But so I wanted to get you on the podcast because of what you do and who you are, and even your experience, and you've done time in student ministry. But just give us the quick snapshot before we jump into the content. Like, man, what have you seen and what do you do for Lifeway and student ministry?
Yeah. So my relationship to student ministry started in middle school. I am the product of a really great youth ministry. I feel like a lot of folks in student ministry are either products of really great and healthy youth ministries, or they had some kind of like pivotal, not great experience they're trying to like reconcile for, right? Like I had 7 youth pastors growing up. I'm going to be the longevity for this group of students. And both I think are really important stories, but I had a really great ministry. And so for me, it was formational as I was walking through questions of vocation, questions of relationships. Like I was the like late 90s millennial kid in the youth group that was full of skaters and goths and Bible nerds and cowboys, because in Oklahoma, like, there's just a little slice of everything.
Praise God.
Served in student ministries in Oklahoma and North Carolina for over 15 years, 16 years, and then joined the Lifeway team in 2019, just in time for the pandemic, which is when everybody wants to start a new job.
Yeah.
But the reason we joined the Lifeway team is, so my buddy, so you and Landon go hand in hand. Chad and I go hand in hand. Started Youth Ministry Booster in 2015 as a podcast that grew into a cohort network as a way to equip youth pastors, support youth pastors, collaborate with youth pastors, because there's a lot of things that are out there to resource them. But one of the resources that's missing is often the community to support them as they're going through challenges or struggles or decisions. And so for us, like, that's the thing that kind of grew. It was our passion. It was our heart. That was like the voice or the mouthpiece on the podcast, was asking those like healthier questions, more than just like, how do we do more? It's, why do you even feel like you need to do more? And so some of those kind of,
that's good.
recentering coaching kind of questions. And so Ben Trueblood, who's the director of Lifeway Students that oversees camps, curriculums, and training, said that he wanted to expand some of the things that they were doing. So training is the umbrella term for what Chad and I get to do. But in a lot of ways, we are students of student ministry and we are ministers to youth ministers. And so whether that's at conferences, whether that's at events that we plan, or our ongoing efforts through podcasting, networking through Youth Ministry Booster and other connection places, Parent Partner as a resource to help youth pastors begin to or rethink how they partner with parents. All of those things are a part of what we do, because, for a lot of youth pastors, they've been pushed into something, or the thing that they used to do 6 or 7 years ago feels very different. And so to have that live relational resource of a community inside of a booster cohort, and then having some folks on Team Lifeway, are really important. So that worked, that helped.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I feel like, and maybe we'll get to this in later, but I feel like you just hit on something that isn't in the notes. It's not in the question, but it's so good, because we were talking about this before we started recording. Student ministry is so unique right now, because you have, like, what's the stat? You guys are the stats guys. It's like 18 months is the average stint of a student pastor, 2 years.
Yeah.
And so you got these guys who are fresh to it, and Gen Z is a thing of its own, right? We're seeing the technology effect. We're seeing the effects of the lockdown and pandemic and all of those things on their mental health.
Emotional, or relational stuntedness. Yeah.
Or like you said, you've got these career guys who felt very called to student ministry, and they've been in it a long time, but all of a sudden their career has changed like so much.
What we used to do ain't what we do anymore, or it feels that way, which is the cliffhanger for the question coming later.
Yeah, no doubt. And so you get to see all of that play out, and you're working with big student ministries and small student ministries and big churches and regular average United States churches and all of those things. So you just, man, I appreciate you being on, because you have such a unique perspective of just the state of student ministry in the country today. And so, man, here, I wanted to give you this. At SSM, we're all about simple and strategy, and we want to talk about things that don't cost more money or take more staff to do.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to student ministry, you've been in it for 15 years. You're leading all these student pastors across the country. You're helping train them. You're giving them community. But when it comes to student ministry in its simplest form, what is student ministry? What's the goal? What is it that we're all trying to accomplish?
Man, I think the at its simplest form, it's facilitating the necessary relationships as students are in a critical season of spiritual, emotional, and social formation. There is a lot that happens in the life of a human from ages 11 or 12 to 18, 19. And I think in a world that has become more and more shaped around selling stuff, pushing products, all of those things need the accompanying mentor and relational pieces that only youth ministry seems to still care to provide. And so the community of care, the mentor folks that it takes and it needs, like, these are the things that youth ministry is really good at. And I think my concern is there's a little bit of the, not just comparison from ministry to ministry, but the comparison with culture of, like, everybody's sending 1,000 messages a minute. There's more ads than videos.
Right.
And so we're like, well, we'll just compete with that. We'll just give the gospel alternative. And that is one form of counterculture to like, okay, this, everything else is going this way. We're going to offer the other thing. But I think to move in the other direction of far more relational is really, really key. And so I think as a youth pastor, like your relationship to students, but also your work to give other adults who are a little more grown, a little more seasoned, the chance to mentor and care for students. It's the 5 people that will pour into one student: teacher, coach,
that's really good.
pastor, parent, mentor, that really helps to set them on the right path. So at some level, it's a sowing season, it's an investment season, it's a trade-off of I care a lot now because I believe in what will happen later.
Dude, it's so good. I'm so encouraged to hear you talk about, at its simplest form, student ministry is about relationships. Because, we work with a lot of student pastors too across the country at different sizes. And one of the things that you talked about that I would just agree with that's really plaguing student guys is the window of social media. And so we're looking at other student ministries, we're looking at other student pastors and other churches with different resources, different cities, different things. And we're seeing all this stuff and it looks larger than life. And it's like, well, how do we pull off, getting an elephant on
how
the
might
stage
I
for
be
this?
they?
And so you're doing all that and you lose the simple strategy of do what only you can do. And, Tim Summers is great. And Tim, if you're watching this, man, we'd love to have you on the podcast. I'm a big fan. But, Tim Summers can't disciple my kids. Only I can do that. And so only I really know what that looks like in Northeast Houston. And so Elevation and, great church, by the way, love Elevation. But I can't do what Elevation does because I'm not them. And so I think part of the simplicity of student ministry is understanding what it simply is. It's relationships with, us as pastors, or you as a student pastor, or maybe you're a student leader in your ministry right now. And you need to understand it's your relationship with students too, and creating an equity and a trust with them to where you can have conversations about faith and the everyday stuff of life. And all the other is just bonus. The great worship experience is bonus. The cool game is bonus. The crowds, it's bonus. At its core, it's how are we creating relationship with students, showing up in their life and facilitating an environment for God to do what only he can do because we've done what only we can do.
And man, I think that's the part too that I think we need to make sure and pause and say for the folks listening is that relationship stuff isn't just a switch you flip, right? It wasn't like the relationship is the correct answer, but it's not. It's the simple answer. It's not the easy answer. Where it's like, I think that's why some of the other stuff is so attractive. Is like, bro, if I could just bankroll some lights and hire an intern to do photography, then we could be fill in the blank. But the relational stuff is slower. It's investment stuff. I think in this season, it's asking really, really like low, straightforward, simple questions that nobody else is asking of your students and with your students. Like, how do you handle conflict that doesn't always end in cancellation? How do you have relationships that are like dating relationships that are not ghost or bust, right? Like, who else is talking that way with their students? Like, why does it matter that we don't cheat on our test? Why is God the one that gives us a model of forgiveness that everybody else seems to like hate on, right? Like why would Jesus being so forgiving get him killed, right? Like, I don't know, that's a big question, but like it also like is kind of a formative question for the faith that we have. Like, why do we show up every week? Man, it's not because we have to, it's because we need to. Oh, well, that's different. What do you mean I need to? Man, like if I'm not here, then I'm less of who I am because I need time with you. Okay. Like these become like, again, there's no technology in those questions. I mean, there's some base stuff of send some messages, emails, text, whatever. But for the most part, a lot of what must be done, and this is where we kind of teased earlier. What must be done are the things that we started doing. And I think there was a season where youth ministry got really professional. And then we all got real shook about like, we did all the things and then we lost the chance to do some of the things. So what were we even doing? And literally we had lights and smoke screen to cover the ways in which we didn't know the names of enough of our leaders and students. And so,
yeah, dude. And even in that, we've got the lights and the smoke screens, and so we've lost the relational equity or capacity. On the other side of that, maybe I'm a guy that doesn't have the lights and the smoke screen, but with my students, I have amazing equity relationally, but
yeah.
I feel like I'm not good.
Mm.
Like how have we created a place where because I don't look like X, Y, or Z, I feel like I'm not a good student pastor? You know, at Conclave, I got to connect with this guy, and he was just beat up, and he was like, dude, I, am following some stuff on social media, and it's just, I feel like I'm failing. And I was like, why do you feel that way? And he's like, well, because, we don't have this and we don't have this. And I was like, well, talk to me about what you do have. And he's like, dude, I got this great group of 8th grade guys right now. I'm like, tell me about them. And he starts telling me about how they're sharing their faith and they're leveraging their influence. And I'm like, man, it sounds like you're doing a great job. Yeah, it sounds like, and so it's like I think we want more because we want to see God save more and bring more and all of those things. But sometimes I think it's, we make the simple complex. And I also love what you said. Simple doesn't mean easy, because if you hear us say, oh, just be simple and have relationships, and you're like, well, that doesn't make sense because relationships are messy and that's really hard. You're absolutely right. But simply at its core, student ministry is about relationships. Last night, we're recording this on a Thursday. Last night, we had a service here at United City Youth, and 4 dudes came just because I texted them.
Yeah, right.
And that's a simple strategy. And I'm not amazing. No one's writing a book about Pat's great because he texts kids. I just saw 4 dudes at signing day. They were there for their friends. Yeah. And I was like, man, I haven't seen those guys in a long time. And I texted them and said, hey, I would love to see you at church tonight. Let's hang out.
Yep.
And they just showed up.
Yep.
Simple strategies, man. It's just relationships. It's relationships.
And it's a consistent work. Again, it's a grit work, right? Like it's the call, it's the text, it's the follow-up, it's the recruiting a leader over a series of 3 coffees to help do more of what you're doing because you're at capacity. And the only way to get out of that is to have more help so that you can have more increased relational investment. But at no point are you ever relationally investing less. It's just where you're putting your time. I think that's one of the things that's important for youth pastors to hear. It's not like as you grow and get better at this, you're going to have less time spent with people. Like the work is to be with the people. Like the shepherd is with the sheep. To pastor is to be with the people. And if you were just really excited about the speaking part or the sermon prep part, friend, I'm here to tell you that that is the overflow of the closeness that you are to your folks and the intensity in which you study scripture. That's not a gig. What a weird gig.
That's the performing, not the pastoring.
100%. Yeah, man. 100%.
Dude, and what you just said, can we talk about that for a second? Because you were just saying something that I think is so key, and for us is why strategy matters. And we'll talk about some strategy here in a second. But, simply if it's relationships and to be with people, dude, honestly, tell me what you think about this. I think that makes systems matter more, because then our time is more valuable because relationships move at the speed of time. And so you were saying something that made me think in my mind, recruiting a leader over 3 coffees. Well, I have to have space. I have to have margin and capacity to do that.
Yeah.
And don't hear me hate on sermon prepping, although hear me talk about it more in our course that we just launched. But if you're spending 16 hours on a sermon, you're missing time that you can be with people. And one of the specifically to sermons, I think one of the things is like, hey, find, your spot. If your sermon isn't any better after 6 hours,
that's it.
Let's prep for 6 hours. You're done.
There's the minimal effective rep or dose, and then there's that extra that again, if you're working out, there's only so many sets before you just you set to failure, and then you could try, but there's nothing left.
Yeah. So you gotta have the time to do what only you can do, and that is relationships, and not just relationship with students, relationship with leaders.
Yeah.
If you're going to lead your leaders to be in relationship with students, you got to be in relationship with your leaders. And so, yeah, that's a whole nother part of the ball game.
Well, so there's a startup company that's been really helpful in just kind of modeling some of the things that we're doing, and they have their blog of the year or whatever from a couple years ago that was kind of like, this is the thing that we're going to be, a manifesto or whatever.
Yeah.
And their service is to create video clips to share with people. And I think for a lot of folks, like, oh, you record it once and then it seems so disingenuous or whatever. Like, no. Like, we created a software tool for you to automate the system to correctly have the relationship. And I think that's for a lot of folks that hear systems, that doesn't remove you from the people, that puts things in the right place. So that every Thursday is Coffee Thursday with a leader. And that's the bucket you're trying to fill. That's it. That's the bucket you're trying to fill every Thursday. And that way you're not like, wait, should I be with students today? No. I do FCA on Tuesday, and then I do the high school prayer breakfast on Wednesday. Whatever it is, like you've taken the time to map the things and to trust that those investments will work. And so, yeah.
Man, I can't tell you how excited I am to hear you speak that language. Because I feel like, and not from bad intentions and not from bad places, but I feel like we're just missing this idea, or we're missing out on what the secular or the business world gets really well. That is, systematize things to give me time back to do the wildly important thing. And I'm just talking to so many guys, and I'm coaching some guys. I'm actually coaching a church in Nashville, their entire staff right now, just through Planning Center, to get some systems, because they realize they need more time for people, and they're spending all their time doing paperwork and all this stuff that isn't people. And so systems aren't the devil.
Right.
Systems can replace people, your love for systems. And there is a way that you can be cold and you can be so systematized that you're not personal, and the Holy Spirit's not working.
You can hide behind it. Yeah.
And you're just well, I'm not going to be with anybody because I'm just going to shoot this automated text out. And it's okay,
smash the iPad in front of their face. You'd be like, "Will you sign up for camp?" Like, no, lower it down, talk to them, but then make sure it's in the database. Yeah. You don't slam the, "Oh, you're new here. Here's the iPad. Fill it out." Whoa, man! Ask them about their kids. Hold on,
Yeah, no doubt. So, but it is important. So, dude, talk about that for a minute, because again, dude, you're training so many student guys, and you're equipping so many people across the country. And so for you, what do you think is the biggest strategy or system that student pastors, or really honestly, I know we keep saying student pastors because you're a student ministry strategist and expert, but
Thanks.
Just any pastor, what's the strategy we need to be focusing on right now?
So I think there is a right obsession with a lot of pastors and time. I think that's always been an entry point of conversation, whether it's a breakout at a conference or standing around in a booth. Some of the things that we've podcasted or blogged about, a lot of ministry leaders feel like they don't have enough time. And they feel that way, much like you were sharing earlier, because they just feel like they have to do it all right now. And measuring, managing, and sculpting your time so that certain days or certain times or for certain things, and we trust that process, we trust that system, creates for us some structure around relationships. Are messy, which means that as much as we can, as best as we can, we need to structure it so that the jello doesn't spill all over. That's one of the things we talk about with our folks is ministry is kind of like a cup, right? Like the calling is the cup, the structure of the cup, and then the passion or the motivation is the fluid, the water, the Gatorade. Sometimes we need to refill our cup because we're out. Passion's gone, motivation's gone. But if you'll take the time and build a bigger cup with better structure, you'll be surprised at how much more passion and motivation you might retain.
Gosh, dude, that's so good.
I'm here for you, man. I'm here for you. No, it's just 20 years of hard, and also several years of getting it wrong. And I want to say that I'm not saying anything today because I always did it right. There was a lot of time, and my wife will tell you, it really has only been the last few years of gaining some perspective of being out of the grind of daily ministry. Like, honestly, I want to share this as someone who did too much, overplanned, um, threatened and jeopardized the closeness I could have had with my family in the summers because I was going to cram one more thing in. Um,
Yeah.
Hear me say, like this, ministry is farming. Like, there is seasons for stuff, there is trust for stuff, there are things that you do at the right time, and there's other things that you do that you wait. And if you're never
Yeah.
waiting, things can't grow until you wait. Muscles
Gosh,
and
that's good.
plants and humans grow when we rest. And so
Yeah,
if
that's
you
so
don't
good.
have the plan for that, you're gonna keep sloshing the mess around, and you're gonna get caught up in the mess instead of helping the folks that are in a relational mess. A 13-year-old is more relational out of sorts than I pray you are. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and what you're saying is so true. What we were just talking about too. Okay, you want a simple strategy to kill the comparison trap. Focus on, okay, you're looking at all these other ministries. Ask yourself, not just what can only I do, but what do we have in common? And you know what you
yeah,
have in
yep,
common? You have 24 hours in a day.
100%.
And you know, my pastor one day, he sat me down and he said, Pat, who's the most like productive person you know that you want to be like? And I said a name, and he said, well, they have 24 hours just like you do. You know, the difference is they spend it better than you do. And I was like, okay. And that's just my pastor. I
That
love him to
hurts, but
death,
all
and
right.
he knows me, and he knows how I need to be led, and so he gives it to me straight. And I'm like, okay, well, okay, then that matters how I spend my time. And so I feel like we get in a comparison trap, and we lose the simplicity of relationships, and we think we got to do all this stuff. And just like you're
Yeah,
saying, I'm going to add another thing. We get burnt out. We get busy. We get worn down from like good motivation. We're trying to do all these awesome things. And then now all of a sudden, you're right, the cup is empty. And so we don't have time for relationship. And now
yeah,
maybe we're bitter, and now maybe we're poisoned a little bit in our
yeah.
spirit. And I remember Timothy Ateek, he used to lead Breakaway, and now he's one of the teaching pastors at Watermark. He was at our church, and I got to spend some time with him, and he was talking to our seniors. And I said, man, what do you think is like one of the most frustrating thing about working with college students? And he said, well, they always come up to me and they tell me about all the things that they're in and that they're a part of. And I always say, don't expect me to be impressed by your busyness,
Mm,
because your busyness just indicates that you're unable to control your schedule.
yeah, yeah.
And I think
Mm.
in love, like, let me wrap this in cheese a little bit and feed it to you if you're listening or watching. You may be a little burnt out and you may be a little tired because you don't have control of your schedule. And so you may be thinking like, man, there's not that much great going on right now because you've lost capacity for relationships
Mm,
because you've been spinning your wheels trying to do all the things. But the main thing that you need to be in is relationship with your leaders and
yeah,
with your students, and most
yep,
importantly, with God.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
If you don't have time for those
So
things, I don't care what else you've planned. You've planned too much. And
say that
again, like
again. That's good.
if you don't have time to spend the morning, and I'll say this as, again, you can hate on it, night owls or whatever. If you don't have the time for God in the morning, first of all, the rest of your day is going to be out of sorts. If the morning is 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 8 a.m., whatever your morning is, if you don't have time for God, and if you don't have time, wake up 20 minutes earlier and be surprised. And then if you don't have time for your leaders and for your students, not on a daily basis, but on a weekly basis. And again, there's a rhythm to that creation
Yeah, that's
story,
good.
church meeting cycle, a weekly basis. Then whatever else you had planned activity wise, you've planned too much. You've got to have time for the people that you are equipping in this season of life. Yeah, sometimes we do that and we mark it with events. Big fan of camp, big fan of winter weekends, big fan of
Yeah. They
leadership
work.
getaways.
They're not going away. They're
The
awesome.
milestones, they matter, but they only matter as much as what they house inside of the relationships, right? Like, you point to the marker that is the campsite or the place or the thing, and then you're reminded of what happened there, the relationship, what you learned, what you experienced. And so for so many folks, I think we get really caught in the, like, here's all that we're going to do, and we're running and we're
Mm,
panicked. um, but the presence that you can offer really is, I think, the gift that a lot of your students, and I think notably what your leaders, are hungry for. They sign up to work with you because they like you for some
yeah.
reason, So give them some more of your time, man. Like they like you. They
Mm-hmm.
want to be a part of, they want front row seats to what God's doing in the student ministry and the places and where you're leading, man. Like don't hire them and then just book them away and never check in on them again.
Yeah, that's good. One of the pastors that really influences me, his name's Jabin Chavez, and he's in Vegas. And
Yeah.
if you don't listen to his podcast, you should. And Jabin, if you're watching, big fan, man.
Also an invite to the podcast, right?
Yeah, also an invite to the podcast. I just want to make sure. I know that these guys are watching, so I just want to make sure that they know that we love them. But
the algorithm's a crazy thing, Pat. The algorithm
yeah,
is a
dude,
crazy
who knows?
thing. You never know. Yeah.
Who knows? But he said something on one of his podcasts where he was talking about, and I can't quote it directly. I'll paraphrase it, but the idea was he stopped telling people he's busy because he's worried it'll make them feel like he's really saying, I don't have time for you. Ooh. So he's like, so when I'm talking to somebody and they're like, man, how are you or whatever, and I go, oh, I'm busy, or, you know, however we say that, then in my mind, like if I'm talking to you, Zach, I'm like, dude, how are you? It's good to see you. It's been a minute since Conclave. Bro, how you doing? If you would have hit me back and been like, man, I'm just super busy, I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to ask to be on the podcast.
Yeah, right.
Because you don't have time. And maybe it's unintentional, but like student pastors or pastors, like, are your people picking up on your busy schedule as you don't have time for me?
Busy's a weird badge of honor, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a weird, like, I don't know. We would not want our doctors or attorneys or like other paraprofessional folks that we count on to be like, hey, doc, how you doing? I'm just too busy. Oh, please don't be too busy for me. Right? Like, like I need you in my life right now. Right.
You're about to go into surgery and your doctor's just talking about how busy they are.
It's like so much going on. Oh,
like,
please focus.
Are you going to rush through this to get to the next thing? It's like, okay, well, I need a bypass. So I need you to be in the moment, dog. I need you to be fired up for this.
We're all here right now. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So, okay, let's be practical and tactical here for just a few minutes before we're done. And so relationships, simplicity, time, getting a hold of your schedule, all that. What's some strategies that you're giving student pastors across the country right now to do just that? Or maybe specifically, what are some things in ministry that need a system or that need to be really strategized that are going to eat up your time, that are going to steal you from relationship? What are you kind of coaching guys through right now?
I think you need to have a regular habit of meeting with your leaders, both kind of corporately and then in a coaching, like, smaller sense. And so I'll give this away as a free download thing at youthministrybooster.com. It'll either be a pop-up or it's like /training boost. But it's one of the things that we've started doing monthly is a way to have a leader huddle meeting with all of your leaders. That's not about like the specific, like what's next in ministry, but how to like better work with teenagers in the
that's
climate
good.
that we're in. And with that, there's a group guide and there's like a coaching one-on-one guide. And that's kind of our encouragement is there should be a monthly time, either real quick before you start on a Wednesday or after on a Sunday with a coffee and a donut, where there's a little video that you can send out or you can watch together and you can talk about it. But it's a way to kind of stir up conversation about like what we're working on the ministry and not just in it. So it's not just like we had a meeting. Don't forget this thing's coming up, but it's like, how do we deal with kids that talk too much? Like that's a question. Like how do we help the kid who doesn't talk enough? Like that's kind of one of those, or like, how do we help kids that are new? Like how do we, what do we actually do for a new kid? I think some of those things are important. And even to carry that further is that coaching thing of, there's probably one of your leaders in the 2, 12 or 20 leaders that you have. There's one that's like, I really hope that he gets this. And so that's where I would take that a couple weeks later, a week later, and have that Thursday coffee or breakfast or whatever, where you're sitting down with Tim or Rod and you're like, hey man, tell me things go in your group. It seems like your boys are kind of rowdy. Does that bother you? You good with it? I want to get a read. And so that's the way that you're growing those leaders beyond just supplying them with, yes, you should have an automatic system that whatever curriculum or guides or whatever you're using go out on time to them with your approval and encouragement. But then that creates space for the other pieces. The biggest one, and I think this is the one Chad and I talked about on the podcast a few weeks ago, is a lot of folks really want new students in their ministry. But if you said, man, Pat, what do you do for new kids? oh, I mean, like, we love on them and we want them to come back. And I'm like, this should not be guesswork, right? Like,
Right.
if someone new shows up, you should have, like, this should be your most articulate system. Like, someone new shows up, this happens and this happens and this happens. And then the next day, this happens. Again, these are automatic steps in forming a deepening relationship. And so whatever those steps might be for you, whether it's like a check-in process with like a handwritten note or a phone call or a t-shirt in the mail or a sticker they wear the night of, or you're delivering cookies to their porch, all good things. You can decide those things. But as a team, you and your leaders and maybe some of your students, to help kind of vet what would feel good and feel right. Like we don't care about t-shirts. Oh, well, how about a basket of cookies? We'd love some cookies, right? Like that'd be awesome. But whatever it is, like there should be an automatic 5, 6, 7 step thing that really helps to carry that through. And so I think that's one of the things that I would not want to miss.
And also with that, like with the time, okay, if you're busy and you're running around, well, what if 100 new students come?
Yeah.
And
if you get swamped, it's catering business. What happens if they all show up?
Yeah. And it's like, okay, so you got to build some margin in. Yeah, that's really good. Any other system that you think is just simple and strategic that's going to help you free up time or to automate and be good, that's going to give you more relational capacity?
This is weird, but I think I even saw Landon post about it the other day. You should have appointments in your calendar that are for your own development. My friend Kristen Lascola, who does the ministry coach, talks about like she has dates with books or dates with podcasts that she'll go and have a lunch that's like, it says like lunch with fill in the author's name or whatever.
Yeah.
So if you see her shared calendar, you're like, you're having lunch with who? And it's like, no, I'm having lunch on Thursday and I'm listening and I'm taking notes. And I think there's a little bit of that, to use an old man language, there's some porch time of trying to gather like a better perspective and learn a little deeper beyond just trying to prepare. So have times and seasons that you prepare, but also have times and seasons that you're porching where you're reflecting. Again, as the guy that was sprinting the whole time and didn't take enough stock until after that season had passed, I would have much rather have not only a healthy sabbatical rhythm of a Monday or Friday or Saturday, but a 90-minute block at this point. Again, maybe it's in the morning, maybe it's in the evening, where you're just reflecting on, man, these 8th grade boys have really come a long way, right? Like they used to be the worst 6th graders. And they sometimes they're a mess, but man, they're bros. And if these bros continue on to sophomore and junior year, our ministry is so blessed. So blessed. Like that needs to be formalized somewhere in your journal or Evernote or something.
Yeah, remind yourself of the wins. Give yourself a little faith fuel.
Yeah.
We're big fans too, and it's not an original idea to us. If you want to do a deep dive, buy Carrie Newhoff's book At Your Best. But
really great.
We're really big fans of the Ideal Work Week, and Landon for sure is a really big, fan of the Ideal Work Day.
Yeah,
and so if you could do everything that you want to do in a week, what would that look like? And then you've said yes to that. So now it's easier to say no. I think I would add a simple strategy to save you time so you can do what only you can do and be relational and all that, is start saying no.
A no is a great way, or a not at this time, right? Not the harsh like no, but hey Pat, when can we record a podcast? Can you record this afternoon? Not right now, but like let's book some time. That's my favorite Sunday after church. Like parent wants to grab you. Hey, Teresa, it looks like it's a big deal to you. Not right at this time. Can we talk about it? But what does Tuesday afternoon look like? Can I call you then?
Yeah. Wow. That's really good.
Yeah. I said no, and then everybody felt good about the no.
Yeah. That's really good. No is good, but maybe not right now is better because it communicates. I would love to connect. I would love to be relational, but at this moment, not right now.
Because you're teaching them relationships, right? Like that's one of those like beyond just the stage time. How you model this and live this is as much a tool of teaching as whatever time you were about to take step to the stage in the music stand. Like that matters, but so does the way you handle people in the room before and after you were holding the mic.
Gosh, dude, that's good. That's good. Well, dude, thanks for jumping on the podcast today and talking about simple ministry. And where can we follow you on Instagram and the podcast? And let me just say this personally real quick, because you may not do it. man, y'all's youth ministry booster does a lot of this. It does a lot of this stuff to free you up for relationships. So if you haven't, you need to go to Lifeway. You need to go to their website. You need to go to Zach's Instagram profile. I believe the link is in the bio, and check out the youth ministry booster. And we're big fans of what's going on over there, and we're fans and we're a part. So if you go to a youth leader coaching or something like that, you may see us there because it means a lot to us too. But how can we get more connected with you and kind of get in on some of the stuff you're doing?
For the Instagram crowd, at Zach Workun, and I'm sure you'll throw it in the notes. Like, feel free to message or DM. That's always a good kind of public sphere to communicate back and forth. Facebook, if you're older, that's fine too. But email is classic. So zac.workun, WRKUN @lifeway.com is great. But Youth Ministry Booster is our weekly podcast. Added video this year. We're trying it. That's new for us. Like, we're old guys that are learning and growing too. But we've been doing it for 8 years. And so Chad and I think it's like camera this way for y'all. You can kind of see the outline of the the garage studio, as it were. But then also I'll try to post as often as I can the places that we go. One of the things that's a blessing for our team is that we kind of have been commissioned to be sent out. It feels very apostolic that way. This spring of 23, we're going to be in Tennessee and Mississippi and Alabama and Florida and Louisiana doing one days that we call essentials. They're free roundtables for youth ministry leaders in that region. Youth Pastor Summit is a regional event that we do in partnership, Lifeway and Student Leadership University, that will be in the hubs of Southern California and Dallas and Orlando and Nashville and Chicago this year. We're excited to add Chicago this year. So we're all over for those. Our Experience Preaching Conference is every May. It's kind of our fun thing that we do that's it's a limited attendance, but for anybody that preaches to students, we actually preach to each other. We have great folks that come in and coach us, but it's actual like real live feedback from a cohort of folks. So it's that blend of cohort and practicum. And then the new thing, I wanted to share this with you, Pac. We talked about it at Conclave. I don't know if it's out live yet, but feel free for your listeners to check it out. Is something for ministers and their spouses. We feel like that is one of the questions we talked about. Like, one of their biggest struggles is I feel like things at home are often sacrificed on the altar of ministry work. And I don't think that needs to be a pattern behavior. Yes, you may have a late night on a Friday, but there ought to be some adjustments for. And so we want to help maybe reset the dial. This November, we'll be out in Western North Carolina. And so that's lifeway.com/escape. It's a getaway for those that are married in ministry, but hopefully not married to the ministry. So we'll see.
That's good. Yeah.
So,
seasons change. And so if you've been in a season of busyness and having to cheat home for the ministry, and that hasn't ever changed, you're not in a season, you're stuck in a pattern. So that's good. Well, dude, man, I appreciate you. I appreciate getting to connect. And when you come into Houston here in a few weeks,
barbecue hanging out, baby. Yeah, man, let's do it.
We may do some live stuff or record some more stuff together. So yeah, dude, it'll be great. And hey, thank you all for listening. We'll link a lot of that in the show notes. As always, man, we want to help you grow your ministry through simple strategies and scalable systems. See y'all.